Hello, it's Heidi Fisher here with the Social Enterprise Online Festival, and today I'm joined by Karen Anderson, who's going to talk to us about staying true to your purpose through the life of your social enterprise. So Karen, it's lovely to have you here today. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and experience, please?
I started in the corporate sector at IBM, Oracle, Grant Thornton and Investec Bank, where I focused on sales and business development. But then I got involved in supporting entrepreneurs, high-tech entrepreneurs initially, and then social entrepreneurs. And I've supported over 1,000 entrepreneurs during my career. And I do anything from helping them set up their enterprise, build their boards, get investment, and grow in whatever way they need, whether it's technology, money, buying another business.
Okay, sounds really interesting. So it's quite a diverse range of things that you're up to. And today we're going to be talking about how you can stay true to your purpose, because obviously this is, for quite a lot of social entrepreneurs, is something that may or may not happen quite easily. They may drift around as different things come up and different options. So how can social entrepreneurs stay true to their purpose?
Well, I think the first thing they need to do is set up their enterprise with their purpose at the heart of it by putting it in their articles. So if they have a company limited by guarantee, which is a classic social enterprise model, they can still insert their articles in there. And it's not quite as important in that legal structure. But when you're talking about companies limited by shares, even community interest companies limited by shares, they need to be incredibly clear what their articles say. And I find that people put this really generic statement, I call them the world peace statements. And people don't understand that if a board of directors are helping to lead the company, they have to lead it in accordance with the articles. And if those articles don't tell them what to do the way the entrepreneur envisages it, then they will just do what they think. And I've even had investors say, well, we'll put something light in the articles like, we really want to help people with this disease and we'll always provide a free online forum. And the forum doesn't have to cost us anything. And so I find that thinking through what's going to cost money is often the thing that figures out what people are going to be the first to dump. And it also helps the entrepreneur figure out what they really, really want to do. So I was working with a children's bookseller, and I said to them, so if you had £1 left over after you'd paid investors and you'd paid all your costs, what would you do with that £1? And they said, well, we'd buy books for children. And so it was really obvious that's what they're trying to do. And the best entrepreneurs I've found can make their object statement in their articles exactly the same as their mission statement that they pitched with. And then they're able to deliver a social impact statement against it. And if they start off like that, then going back and growing and reflecting, going, oh, are we meeting this? We've said this is what we want to do, is really helpful.
Okay, that's a really, really good answer in terms of from the start making sure it's in your articles and being really clear, and not having the vague, we want to help all disadvantaged people in the world. Which it probably isn't going to then mean that you're not very focused in terms of what you plan to do going forward. So what happens though if you've been going along for a little while and you have been quite focused on your purpose, and then out of nowhere you get the opportunity to have investment or funding to do something different? What would you say, change your purpose, or would you say stick with your original purpose? How do people make a decision what to do in that situation?
Well, the first thing I do is assess where this opportunity came from, because they don't normally just wander up and say, we'll give you some money. You're normally looking for money. And if you're looking for money, I would assume if you've stuck to your purpose, you're looking for money to deliver something very specific. And if this other organization either gives you an opportunity for a contract or a grant or investment to do something different, I think comparing what you were planning on asking for against what they are talking about as a start, and coming back to saying, how much impact have we had? So putting your purpose in your articles as a starting point, but it's also the point that you need to measure against. And sometimes you might be doing something for 5 or 6 years and feel like you're having an impact, but not the depth of impact you want. maybe this new opportunity gives you additional impact. But I think seriously putting aside the money and saying, is this going to make the change in the world we want to make? And then you might find that that's not enough money, or, you know, because you've got to really assess it against, is this worthwhile? Because entrepreneurs are the people who are staying up and generally not paying themselves a lot because they really believe in this change in the world, and being distracted by somebody going, oh, maybe we can do this with you, isn't always helping their long-term aim.
No, that's true. What the other thing that has come up a few times lately is where organisations are actually thinking about shrinking rather than growing, because there's an automatic tendency when people set up their enterprise to think, oh, we need to grow, we need to keep growing. But actually, what I've seen is a few organisations where they're shrinking so they can focus more on their purpose. Have you come across those kind of things, and how did that work for organisations, if you have?
Yes, I mean, the first time I noticed it was working with some development trusts when there was a lot of funding around assets, probably about 10, 12 years ago. And a lot of them were consciously growing by getting as many assets as they could and employing as many people as they could to impact the local community. But they were very aware that if all the assets worked, they could continue to employ people, but they don't always work, and all their income streams weren't going to maintain. So they consciously grew in order to shrink, which I think is a very specific model of generating community change. But I've also seen entrepreneurs who've suddenly stopped and said, why are we doing this? Why are we just employing another person because we're employing another person? And I think that kind of conscious review of what the business is doing is a really good thing. And I've actually challenged some entrepreneurs where they felt incredibly stressed because people are saying they should be growing, and actually they don't feel ready to grow, or they feel like the organization's having the impact they want and they maybe want to have time to stabilize.
Okay, so because of your experience as well around governance, how can you get your board to help and support perhaps the initial social entrepreneur that set up the organisation to keep on track with their purpose? What kind of things should the board be doing in terms of that role as in a strategic way?
Well, I think being clear how often they're meeting, and which sounds obvious, but lots of people don't. And then also having discussions with the entrepreneur around, you know, what are the key performance indicators that the board wants to see. And any board should be asking entrepreneurs for not just the profit numbers, but the beneficiary numbers, but also asking them questions around, is this the best way to achieve your impact? And I've been involved in some discussions with boards, with social enterprises, where they've actually said, what would success be? And the answer's been that we're so good at what we've done that we need to close down. And I think that's a really brave board that's prepared to say, right, let's really dream big and figure out how we want to make the system change. And if we achieve that, then we need to plan when to end.
I love that. That for me is the ultimate social enterprise, where they've actually solved the problem and the cause of the problem, as opposed to just dealing with treating the symptoms that come out, which is something that I absolutely love when I get to work with an organisation that wants to do that kind of level of work, rather than just saying, well, we'll just keep treating all these symptoms that come out of this problem, because they'll never end. So that's a fantastic. So in a lot of social enterprises, they struggle to get decent board members. So how can they still ensure that this good governance happens if they can't attract the right people onto their boards in the first place? Tricky question.
I think they need to start with finding the right board members.
Okay.
And I meet lots of social enterprises who say we can't find board members, and I've made it a little mini project of mine to start building a network of people who do want to be board members. And I helped found an organisation called Changing the Chemistry, where we wanted to help diversity of boards. And what we found is a lot of people now want to be non-exec directors and they want to get experience. So they need to start with startups, and social enterprises is a good place. And secondly, they also they like to have variety in their portfolio. So a lot of people who want to be non-exec directors want something on the social end. And so connecting with those people is something that is possible. But what I usually find is the entrepreneur doesn't really know what the point is in the board. And, I was talking to an entrepreneur who I started working with 3 years ago, and she said, you know, you said I need to get systems in the business and I need to get a board. And she said, and I started very reluctantly doing both. And it was a bit like going on a diet and expecting to lose weight in a month. And she said, 18 months down the line, I can tell you it's brilliant because I have a board I trust who are supporting me, and the business is growing in a completely different way. But I find, and I want to tout this entrepreneur around to say, please tell other people how great a board is, and they're not taking away autonomy. So once I've got over that discussion with them and saying, well, you need a job description and you need a little pack with a little advert. Because if I'm promoting the possibility of board directors in a social enterprise, and they go, well, tell me about the social enterprise, and I don't have a little pack that's got a little introduction and saying what they were looking for and what the current directors are doing, then I can't remember everybody. And it's great to be able to connect them to a link on a website and say, this is where they are, check them out. So I think people often don't think through how to attract directors and understand why they want them. They just go, oh, I need an accountant or I need a lawyer. And they don't think about what they really need in business.
Yeah, I think the number of requests I've had to join boards because I'm an accountant by background, it's scary, and it's like, really. And I think there's enough accountants out there for others to have a choice of doing this. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so it's much more about really looking at the gaps in skills, you'd say, then.
Yes.
Okay. Another question around still sticking with staying true to our purpose, but again drawing in some of your other experience around restructuring and mergers and acquisitions. How can you stay true to your purpose if you are planning to perhaps restructure or merge or acquire another organisation? What kind of things come up for organisations when they go through that process of perhaps thinking about merging or acquiring another organisation?
Well, again, I think it depends why they're doing it. So the best type, I'd say, of merger or acquisition is when an organisation says, we'd like to grow and we've looked around and we think this is going to increase our impact and it might add more income to the business, which again increases our impact. And they start the restructuring from that point of view. There are some organizations that end up merging because they're forced on them by contracts or commissioners. And I find that because people haven't thought it through as a choice, it often isn't managed really well. And I think one of the key problems they found statistically that across all types of businesses where acquisitions or mergers go wrong is when you haven't communicated effectively. And most of the time it's because people haven't communicated with the people in the business. And if a social enterprise's people are disconnected, they're not delivering their impact. And so they're not as effective and everything starts to fall down. But I think everyone gets so focused on the process of the merger or the process of the restructure that they forget to communicate and tell everyone what's going on, even if it is just a weekly, this is what we're thinking of, we haven't made a decision. You don't have to share all the highs and lows because that might scare people. But just being transparent and saying this is what's happening so they don't hear about it by their friends down the pub saying, oh, I saw these two CEOs chatting. What's your boss up to?
Yeah, it's funny now with social media, things seem to get out before even the staff know nowadays. So, okay. So in terms of our purpose, if we want to change it, let's say we've been going for 5-6 years, we've had a massive impact in terms of what we've done, and we've perhaps got to the point where we've solved or mostly solved an issue in a particular community, and we're then looking to change our purpose and do something slightly different, would you say do that, or would you say move and work in a different geographical area, or is it a case of just thinking about, well, why you might want to do that in the first place?
Well, I think it's not going to happen overnight that you suddenly achieve that impact of addressing it. So thinking ahead and going, this seems to be going really well, what else could we do? So starting to think probably a year or two ahead of that stage of, if this particular approach works really well, what are we going to do? Are we going to do it in another region? Are we going to consider replicating it? So that we might franchise it, we might license it, or open other offices. And I think it's important to think about that kind of growth with this kind of 2 or 3 year lead, because you need to start preparing how to share what you did that far in advance. And I suggest that people have like a folder that they keep social media, they keep photos, they keep lots of recordings of stories, they keep their initial flyers and marketing plans and business plans, so that they've got evidence of the journey which they can then share with people, because that journey is tangible about the values of the organization. And so often the change that social enterprises make isn't so much what they do but how they do it, and it's quite a difficult thing to do that again, because you've got different people and you've got a different community, and if you haven't figured out really clearly what your special thing is, it's quite hard. So I was talking to an organization that's got a great product, getting homeless people into work, and we were talking about why they're so good at it and what's different about their approach, and possible organizations who might want to take what they do into other regions. And she suddenly casually said to me, well, what we do is when the guys come in the morning, we make sure everyone eats breakfast together. And I was like, well, that's really different. Most people doing that work aren't going to do that. So if you want to grow, you need to document that little thing that to you is quite obvious for other people to do. And I think I've noticed social enterprises do so many things like that that are just, well, doesn't everybody else do that?
Yeah.
Everybody else care? And that's the special part, and that's the part that you need to know. If we did this more in other areas, how would we get everyone else to do it the way we've been doing it?
Okay, that's a really good point there, because a lot of people don't recognise the uniqueness of what they're doing in terms of how they deliver their purpose. Do you think the purpose is led by the initial founder, the initial social entrepreneur, and they drive that, or does there come a point where actually it becomes part of the ethos of the organisation, or do you still need that person to be there continually driving that purpose?
I think an entrepreneur who is really clear on what they're trying to achieve and what kind of culture they want can inculcate that into the organization. But what tends to happen is they tend to keep everybody to the purpose by cult of personality and by their energy being everywhere and controlling everything and reminding people, this is how we do it, this is how. And what I find is that works really well when there's a small group, but as you get a big group, the weight that's on that entrepreneur's shoulders to carry on running around connecting everybody is just too big. So the entrepreneurs that are successful are the ones that build systems to fill the gap and reinforce them. So it's a bit like they're a net, their personality is this net holding everything together. And what they really want to do is build underneath this set of systems so that there isn't a gap, because this net's got higher and higher off the ground as there's more people. But I find entrepreneurs are often not the kind of people who like systems. And that's one of the things I like to explain to them, that if you really want to have this impact and you want it to be your way, systems and processes is almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the favourite thing of an entrepreneur, because being very innovative and creative and just getting on with things is much more likely than sitting there working through a load of systems.
Except I've met some that do that, and I've actually said to them, and how are you going to make sure everyone follows your plan? One of my favorite entrepreneurs, who's a musician, incredibly innovative, said, I've got an app that tells them how to do everything. And I loved it.
Yeah, it's still innovative because it's an app. Yeah, so but it's actually doing the job that he wants done. Yeah, that's brilliant. So what about mission drift? It's something that's thrown around quite a lot. I hear it much more with charities and perhaps with social enterprises. But how have you seen organisations drift from their mission, and what kind of things have happened to them when they've done that?
Well, I think there's two times they drift. And the first is in that startup phase where social enterprises tend to grab every piece of work that they see. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that happens with everybody in startup mode. You just go, well, I don't know where the next penny's coming from, so I'll just do as much as I can. And I think that's why it's quite good in early stages for an entrepreneur to have a board to keep on saying, oh, hold on a second, you've just charged off in that direction. I don't understand how that relates to the mission. And that's exactly the time when the entrepreneur doesn't like having a board around, because they really want to grow fast, and boards would be a bit like, what are you doing here? And then I think the second time is when when you were describing that issue, when they feel like they've stabilized, or maybe they've started to seriously address the issue and they're looking for other things to do, that's when they start to do mission drift. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Some entrepreneurs successfully create a group of social enterprises that kind of attack different areas of a problem and things grow out. So I'm sure, Martin Hogg with Citizen Coaching, and he started out with his community interest company addressing counselling, but realised that the way he was selling his counselling and marketing it meant that lots of people were asking him for tips on how to do websites and social media. And he realised that he could help the people he was counselling by getting into jobs if he created another little business. And I think that kind of mission creep is great, and it's if you're constantly going, what's the point? And if it's adding your impact, brilliant. And you have to also, just like the charities of mission drift, I think sometimes it's worth people considering setting up a subsidiary to be really clear, this is in that piece and this is in this piece, and the focus is slightly different, which again would then require different board members on the subsidiaries, which would again help get some focus in either piece.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so in terms of any top tips for social entrepreneurs to stay true to their purpose, what kind of things would you share for them in terms of top tips?
Well, the first thing I'd say is forget using what I call the P word. Whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, they go, I'm so passionate about this. This is my passion. I want to see passion. I want to demonstrate it. I don't want it talked about. And I think it's something that everybody says social entrepreneurs should be doing, but it's one of my pet hates because I think it's wasting a sentence when they should be focusing on delivery. And I think the second thing is in a way linked to that. I would say test out flattery. People are very unlikely to tell you that's not a good idea if you're trying to change the world in a positive way. And finding critical friends or good directors or people who will honestly tell you whether what you're doing is a good idea is quite hard. One of the ways is to try and get that person to buy a service from you or buy a product from you, make them pay for it, because then suddenly they'll stop saying, oh, it's a lovely idea. They'll go, oh, yes, it's great, but I'm not really looking for that right now, which might be code for actually that product doesn't have legs or that service doesn't have legs, and nobody really wants to tell you that. And then the final point is you can only keep to your mission if you can find a product or service that allows you to do it where you get paid more than it costs you to do it. And I kind of see the financials in a rigorous and a clear financial model, which is obviously linked to reality rather than an imaginary financial model, as the backbone both of the business and of the business plan, because you just can't deliver your impact without that.
Brilliant. That's really, really useful, those tips. Any final thoughts that you want to share today? Yes, no?
Read your articles. I was helping a social entrepreneur the other day and she went, oh, who knew I'm supposed to read my articles?
Yeah, read them, know what's in them. Yeah, it's amazing the amount of people that will ask an external person a question. It's like, well, that will be in your articles. Yeah.
How to run a board meeting, who can be a director, who can be a member, all these things. It's like a little handbook for governance, all in your own articles.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, thank you, Karen. It's been really, really good talking to you today. And thank you for sharing your tips around purpose and governance and all kinds of other things. I think I've tapped into a number of your areas of expertise. So if anyone does want to get in contact with Karen, her details will be underneath the interview. So you can get in touch with her and ask her any questions and find out a bit more about how she might be able to help you with these kind of areas. So it's really nice to have seen you today, and thank you for joining me. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye.